I am Mackenzie, 32 years old, and I never thought I would be banned from my own sister's wedding. The pain of exclusion was bad enough, but what hurt more was how my entire family laughed it off like it was some kind of joke. Nobody stood up for me. Not one person. Well, they certainly are not laughing anymore. Not since my yacht wedding in Monaco turned their mocking into daily phone calls begging for attention. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my family, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button to join me for more stories about standing up for yourself. Growing up with Allison, who is 3 years older than me, was like living in a constant shadow. From the time we were little girls, she was always the perfect daughter in our parents' eyes. Allison had straight blonde hair that never seemed to frizz like mine did, perfect grades without seeming to try very hard, and a natural talent for activities our parents valued, like piano and tennis. I, on the other hand, was the messy one with wild curly hair, the one who had to study twice as hard to get B's, and whose interests in photography and computer programming were dismissed as just hobbies. Our parents, Jessica and Brian, never tried to hide their preference. When Allison won first place at the science fair in 5th grade, Dad took the whole family out for a fancy dinner. When I won the state photography competition in high school, Mom just said, "That is nice, dear," and continued making dinner. At Christmas, Allison would get thoughtful gifts that aligned with her interests, while I would get generic gift cards or clothes that were more my mother's style than mine. One particularly painful memory stands out from when I was 12. I had saved up my allowance for months to buy Allison a beautiful bracelet for her 15th birthday, selecting each charm carefully to represent our shared memories. When she opened it at her party, she barely looked at it before setting it aside for the next gift. Later, I found it in the trash. When I confronted her, tears streaming down my face, she just shrugged and said, "It is not really my style, Kenzie. You should know that by now." Mom overheard and told me not to be so sensitive, that Allison did not mean anything by it. But the truth was clear in Allison's smirk when Mom was not looking. She knew exactly what she was doing. Despite these dynamics, I kept trying to win my parents' approval. I joined clubs I thought they would approve of, dated boys they would like, and eventually chose a business major in college because Dad said it was practical. Allison, meanwhile, pursued education, becoming an elementary school teacher, a profession our mother, a former teacher herself, considered noble and worthy. College was the first time I felt like I could breathe. Away from my family's constant comparisons, I discovered I actually had a talent for finance. I graduated with honors and quickly moved up in a prestigious investment firm in New York. By 26, I was earning more than both my parents combined, had my own apartment in Manhattan, and was traveling internationally for work. Allison followed a more traditional path. After college, she moved back to our hometown in Connecticut, got a teaching job at the local elementary school, and dated a series of men my parents deemed suitable, mostly sons of their friends or colleagues. She would call me occasionally, but our conversations were surface level, filled with subtle digs about my flashy lifestyle and reminders of how our parents worried I was becoming too big for my boots. As the years passed, the distance between us grew. I would come home for major holidays but always left feeling drained and diminished. Every accomplishment I shared was met with polite smiles and quick subject changes, usually to Allison's much more modest achievements, which were celebrated enthusiastically. The last real attempt I made at reconciliation was 3 Thanksgivings ago. I brought an expensive bottle of wine, prepared to share news about my recent promotion. When I arrived, Allison was already there with her new boyfriend, Thomas. He seemed nice enough, a bit quiet, but he had kind eyes and shook my hand firmly. Throughout dinner, I noticed how he watched the family dynamics with a slight furrow in his brow, especially when Dad interrupted me mid-sentence to ask Allison about one of her students. After dinner, I found Thomas in the kitchen getting more ice. "They always like this?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the living room where my parents were fawning over photos of Allison's class trip. "Pretty much my whole life," I admitted. He shook his head slightly. "Must be tough." That small acknowledgement almost brought tears to my eyes. It was the first time anyone had noticed, let alone validated, the unequal treatment. Later that night, I overheard Thomas and Allison arguing in hushed tones on the porch. "Your sister seems great," he said. "I do not understand why your parents treat her that way. Or why you go along with it." "You do not understand my family," Allison snapped back. "Mackenzie has always been difficult. She thinks she is better than us now with her big city job and designer clothes." "That is not what I saw tonight," Thomas replied. "I saw someone trying to connect and being shut down." Their voices dropped lower, and I slipped away, a mix of gratitude and sadness washing over me. At least someone saw the truth, even if it changed nothing. After that Thanksgiving, my visits became even less frequent. I threw myself into work, built a life I loved in New York, and tried to make peace with the fact that I would never have the family relationship I craved. I called on birthdays and major holidays, sent appropriate gifts, and kept conversations brief and impersonal. Then, about 18 months ago, Mom called to tell me Allison and Thomas were engaged. "The wedding will probably be next June," she said. "Allison wants a traditional church wedding. Nothing extravagant like I am sure you would want." I ignored the jab and congratulated her. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped this might be a chance to repair some of the damage between us. Maybe as adults, with Allison secure in her happiness, we could finally move past the competition that had defined our relationship. How wrong I was. The first sign that something was off came when my parents mentioned booking their hotel rooms for Allison's wedding during our monthly phone call. It was January, about 5 months before the wedding date. "Have you booked yours yet?" Mom asked casually. "I have not received an invitation yet," I replied, a slight unease settling in my stomach. "Oh, well, I am sure it is coming," she said dismissively. "Allison has been so busy with everything." A week later, I was having dinner with our cousin Heather, who lived in New York too. "I am so excited for Allison's wedding," she gushed. "Did you see they are having a string quartet for the ceremony? So elegant." "Actually, I have not gotten my invitation yet," I admitted. Heather's fork paused midway to her mouth. "Really? That is weird. I got mine 3 weeks ago." The next day, I called Allison directly. We rarely spoke on the phone, preferring to text occasionally, but this warranted a call. "Hey, Allison," I said when she picked up. "I was talking to Heather, and she mentioned she got her wedding invitation a while ago." "I have not received mine yet, so I was wondering if there was a problem with the mail or something?" There was a long pause before Allison cleared her throat. "Actually, Mackenzie, Thomas and I have decided to keep our wedding small and intimate." "Oh," I said, confused. "But Heather is coming?" "And Mom mentioned the extended family." Another pause, longer this time. "Look, I am just going to be straight with you. You are not invited to the wedding." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? Why?" "Because it is my special day, and frankly, I do not want to be overshadowed. Every family gathering turns into the Mackenzie show with your stories about jet-setting around the world and your fancy apartment and your important job. For once, I want the attention on me, not you." I was speechless, the phone clutched tightly in my hand. "Allison, I would never try to overshadow your wedding. I am your sister. Half the family already likes you better even though you barely show up anymore. Mom and Dad might favor me, but everyone else is always Mackenzie this and Mackenzie that. Not this time. This day is about me and Thomas." "Have you told Mom and Dad about this decision?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Of course. They agree it is for the best. Less drama." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence in my apartment, trying to process what had just happened. My own sister had banned me from her wedding out of pure jealousy, and my parents had supported the decision. The rejection was so blatant, so cruel, it left me breathless. 2 weeks later, during a previously planned trip home to visit a client in Hartford, I reluctantly agreed to attend a family dinner. I had considered canceling, but some stubborn part of me refused to hide as if I had done something wrong. I arrived at my parents' house to find not just them and Allison, but also my Aunt Meredith and Uncle Frank, cousins Grace and Tiffany, and Thomas, who looked deeply uncomfortable as soon as I walked in. "There she is," Uncle Frank boomed. "The banished sister." My face burned as everyone except Thomas laughed. Even my father chuckled while pouring drinks. "Oh, come on, Mackenzie, lighten up," Aunt Meredith said. "It is kind of funny. Who gets banned from their sister's wedding?" "I do not find it funny at all," I said quietly, accepting the glass of wine my father handed me without meeting his eyes. "Allison is just being a classic bridezilla," Grace said, elbowing my sister playfully. "She does not want anyone prettier than her at the wedding, right, Al?" More laughter. Allison smiled tightly. "I just want one day that is not about Mackenzie's amazing life." "Speaking of which," my mother interjected, "tell us about your latest trip, Mackenzie." "Paris, was it? For a whole week. Must be nice to have such a flexible job." The dismissive tone in her voice was clear. My career was still just a job to her, not the result of years of hard work and dedication. "It was a business trip," I said flatly. "I was in meetings 12 hours a day." "Well, some of us have real responsibilities that keep us from gallivanting around Europe," Allison said. "Like planning a wedding you are paying for yourself." The pointed comment about money was directed at me. Allison knew our parents had contributed significantly to her wedding fund. "Just let your sister have her moment," my father said, patting my hand condescendingly. "You have plenty of excitement in your life without attending one wedding." The conversation moved on to wedding details, with everyone studiously avoiding looking at me directly. Cousin Tiffany, however, could not resist one more dig. "Maybe we should set up a cardboard cutout of Mackenzie at the reception," she suggested. "Then she can be there without stealing the spotlight." The table erupted in laughter again. Even my mother giggled behind her napkin. I looked around at their amused faces, a heavy realization settling over me. These people, my family, did not just favor Allison. They actively enjoyed seeing me hurt. My success, instead of making them proud, had made me a target. Thomas was the only one not laughing. Our eyes met briefly across the table, and he gave a small, apologetic shake of his head. In that moment, I wondered if he knew what Allison had planned or if he had been informed after the fact. I set down my barely touched wineglass and stood up. "I think I should go." "Oh, do not be so sensitive," my mother said. "We are just teasing." "No, you are not," I said, finding my voice at last. "You are being cruel, and you are enjoying it. I have never done anything to hurt any of you. I have only tried to build a life I can be proud of, and somehow that has made me deserving of this treatment." The table fell silent. "Mackenzie," my father started. "No," I cut him off. "I am done. Enjoy the wedding, all of you. I hope it is everything Allison dreams it will be." I left without another word, tears streaming down my face as I drove away from the house I grew up in. For the first time, I felt completely alone in the world. My family had not just excluded me, they had made me the butt of their jokes, turning my pain into their entertainment. As I checked into my hotel that night, a new feeling began to take root alongside the hurt, a determination that things would be different from now on. I would never again put myself in a position to be humiliated by the people who should love me most. Little did I know that fate was about to hand me the perfect opportunity for a lesson they would never forget. After that disastrous family dinner, I threw myself into work with renewed intensity. If my family could not appreciate me, at least my career provided validation, purpose, and distraction from the ache of rejection. I took on additional projects, volunteered for international assignments, and spent longer hours at the office than ever before. 3 months after being banned from Allison's wedding, I was sent to Miami for an investment conference. My firm was considering backing a luxury yacht charter business that was looking to expand, and I was tasked with evaluating the opportunity and meeting the owner. The conference was held at a beachfront hotel, with presentations during the day and networking events in the evenings. It was at one of these evening receptions, standing alone with a glass of champagne and watching the sunset over the ocean, that I first met Lucas. "Not enjoying the party?" a voice asked from beside me. I turned to see a tall man with warm brown eyes and a slight smile. He was dressed more casually than most attendees in linen pants and a light blue button-down with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms. "Just taking a moment of quiet," I replied. "These events can be a bit overwhelming." He nodded, extending his hand. "Lucas Bennett. And you are the woman who asked all the smart questions during my presentation today." I felt a flush of pleasure at being recognized for my professional acumen rather than being dismissed. Mackenzie Mitchell. "Your presentation on sustainable luxury experiences was fascinating." "Thank you. Though I got the feeling you were not entirely convinced by my growth projections." I laughed, surprised by his directness. They seemed a bit optimistic given the current market conditions. Instead of being offended, Lucas grinned. "Finally, someone who does not just nod along. Would you be willing to share your thoughts over dinner? I would value a perspective like yours." That dinner turned into 3 hours of conversation that flowed effortlessly from business to personal passions, childhood stories, and future dreams. Lucas had built his yacht charter business from scratch after walking away from his family's hotel empire in California. Like me, he understood what it meant to forge your own path, sometimes at great personal cost. "My father still introduces me as his rebellious son who plays with boats at family functions," he told me, a trace of old hurt visible behind his smile. "My family just banned me from my sister's wedding," I found myself admitting, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Instead of the awkward silence or prying questions I expected, Lucas reached across the table and briefly squeezed my hand. "Their loss," he said simply. That night marked the beginning of something I had never experienced before, a relationship built on mutual respect, understanding, and genuine appreciation. After returning to New York, Lucas and I spoke daily. Despite running his business from Miami, he found reasons to be in New York frequently, and I began finding excuses to attend conferences or meet clients in Florida. 2 months into our relationship, Lucas invited me to spend a weekend on one of his company's yachts. "No pressure," he assured me. "The crew will give us complete privacy, but they will be there if you are uncomfortable at any point." The weekend was magical. Sailing along the Florida Keys, swimming in crystal clear waters, and talking for hours under the stars. Lucas was attentive but never possessive, confident but never arrogant. For the first time, I felt completely accepted for who I was, with no need to downplay my success or dim my light to make someone else comfortable. "I want you to meet my family," Lucas said on our last night aboard. "They will love you." The prospect filled me with both anticipation and dread. What if his family was like mine? My fears proved completely unfounded. The following month, we flew to California for his mother's birthday celebration. Elizabeth Bennett welcomed me with a warm hug, and Lucas's siblings, an older brother, Marcus, and younger sister, Sophia, immediately included me in their good-natured banter. During dinner, when I mentioned a recent work achievement, the entire family raised their glasses in a toast. To Mackenzie's brilliance, Elizabeth said warmly. "We are so glad Lucas found someone as accomplished and kind as you." I nearly cried at the table, overwhelmed by the simple act of acknowledgement that my own family had never provided. Later, Lucas found me on the patio, wiping away tears. "Too much?" he asked gently. "No," I said. "Just very different from what I am used to." "Your family is wonderful. They see what I see in you," he said, pulling me close. "Someone extraordinary who deserves to be celebrated, not diminished." Over the next several months, our relationship deepened. We navigated the challenges of distance with regular visits and daily video calls. I met his friends, who welcomed me warmly, and he met mine, charming them with his genuine interest in their lives and his complete lack of pretension despite his success. As Allison's wedding approached, Lucas provided steady support through my waves of hurt and anger. You do not need to pretend it does not bother you, he assured me. It is a cruel thing they have done. You are allowed to be upset. The weekend of Allison's wedding, Lucas surprised me with a trip to the Bahamas. I thought you might want to be somewhere beautiful while they are all gathered without you, he explained. It was exactly what I needed: sunshine, clear water, and the company of someone who truly cared about my feelings. We spent the days swimming and exploring the island, and the evenings enjoying intimate dinners under the stars. I barely thought about the wedding back home. On our last night in the Bahamas, Lucas arranged for a private dinner on the beach. As the sun set in brilliant oranges and pinks, he got down on one knee in the sand. "Mackenzie, meeting you has been the greatest gift of my life," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You are brilliant, kind, and stronger than you know. You have shown me what it means to face rejection with dignity and to keep your heart open despite being hurt. I want to spend my life making you as happy as you make me. Will you marry me?" The ring he held was stunning, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the last rays of sunlight. But more beautiful than the ring was the look of absolute certainty and love in Lucas's eyes. "Yes," I whispered, tears of joy streaming down my face. "Yes, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto my finger and pulled me into his arms, a thought flashed through my mind. After years of being the family disappointment, I had found someone who saw me as a prize. And suddenly, I knew exactly where I wanted to get married. "Lucas," I said, pulling back slightly to meet his eyes. "How would you feel about getting married on one of your yachts?" His smile was radiant. "I think that sounds perfect. Any particular destination in mind?" "I was thinking Monaco would be nice," I replied, a plan already forming. "Very elegant. Very exclusive." Lucas laughed, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Planning to make a statement, are we?" "Maybe a small one," I admitted. "Is that terrible?" He kissed me softly. "After what they have put you through, I think it is perfectly reasonable. And Monaco is beautiful in June." As we sealed our engagement with another kiss under the stars, I felt a sense of peace and excitement about the future. Lucas and I would build our life together, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for us. And if my family wanted to be part of that life, they would need to earn their place in it. The irony was not lost on me that in being excluded from Allison's wedding, I had found my way to the greatest happiness I had ever known, and the perfect opportunity to show my family exactly what they had been dismissing all these years. Back in New York, Lucas and I began planning our wedding in earnest. While I had initially suggested the yacht wedding in a moment of petty inspiration, the more we discussed it, the more perfect it seemed. Not just as a statement to my family, but as a genuine reflection of us as a couple, Lucas's connection to the sea and my love of travel and new experiences. "If we are going to do this," Lucas said one evening as we browsed potential locations online, "let us do it right. The Serene is our flagship yacht, 300 feet of pure luxury. She will be in the Mediterranean next summer for the charter season." The Serene was magnificent, a floating palace with multiple decks, a swimming pool, formal dining room, and accommodations for 24 guests in addition to the 15 crew members. The photos of her sailing past Monaco's stunning coastline sealed the deal. "It is perfect," I agreed. "But are you sure we can take it out of charter rotation during the high season? That must be a significant revenue loss." Lucas smiled, touching my cheek gently. "Some things are more important than money, Mackenzie. This is our wedding. I want it to be everything you dream of." We decided on a date in mid-June, strategically 2 weeks after Allison's wedding. This timing was not accidental. I wanted my family to have just enough time to recover from one wedding before being confronted with the stark contrast of mine. For our wedding planner, we hired Karen Davidson, a celebrity event coordinator known for her discretion and creativity. When we met with her in her sleek Manhattan office, she was refreshingly straightforward. "Monaco in June is a statement in itself," she noted, reviewing our preliminary ideas. "Adding a superyacht takes it to another level. Are you envisioning an intimate gathering or something more grand?" "Somewhere in between," I replied. About 100 guests, but with no expense spared on the details. We want it to be unforgettable. Karen nodded, already making notes. A 7-day Mediterranean cruise for the wedding party, culminating in the ceremony in Monaco, followed by a 3-day celebration there before the guests return home? Exactly, Lucas confirmed. We will handle all travel arrangements for our guests, of course. Over the next few weeks, Karen presented us with increasingly magnificent plans: Michelin-starred catering, custom cocktails, a string quartet for the ceremony followed by a renowned DJ for the reception, fireworks over the harbor, and welcome packages for guests that included personalized items from Monaco's finest boutiques. As the plans came together, it was time to send out invitations. I had been avoiding thinking about my family, focusing instead on the joy of planning a celebration with Lucas and his loved ones. But now I had to decide, would I be the bigger person and invite them, or maintain the boundary they had established when they excluded me from Allison's wedding? What do you think? I asked Lucas one night, curled against him on our sofa. We had recently moved in together, combining our lives in a spacious apartment overlooking Central Park. I think, he said carefully, that you should do whatever brings you peace. If having them there would cast a shadow over our day, do not invite them. If excluding them would leave you with regrets, then invite them. This is about us and our future, not about settling scores. His wisdom, as always, centered me. After much reflection, I decided to invite them all: my parents, Allison and Thomas, the aunts, uncles, and cousins who had laughed at my expense. Not out of spite, but because I wanted to close this chapter properly and begin my new life with Lucas free from lingering resentment. The invitations we sent were works of art, thick cream cardstock in custom blue leather folios, each containing details about the yacht, Monaco, the week's itinerary, and a personal note that we looked forward to sharing this special time with them. Each invitation made clear that all expenses would be covered, from first-class airfare to accommodations in Monaco to the cruise itself. 3 days after the invitations were sent, my phone rang with my mother's number. I had not spoken to her since leaving the family dinner in tears months ago. "Mackenzie," she said when I answered, her voice unnaturally bright. "We received your wedding invitation today. It is quite something." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "Lucas and I are very excited about it. Monaco. And on a yacht. It all seems very extravagant." There was a note in her voice I had never heard before. Was it respect? Or just envy? "It suits us," I said simply. "Will you and Dad be able to attend?" "Of course. We would not miss it. Your father is already looking into buying a new suit." The eagerness in her voice was almost comical. "We had no idea your relationship was so serious." "You barely mentioned him." "There was a lot going on," I replied, the understatement hanging between us. "Well, we are very much looking forward to meeting him. And the cruise sounds lovely. So generous of you both to arrange everything." After ending the call, I sat in silence, processing the interaction. My mother had not apologized for their treatment of me. She had not even acknowledged the wedding band or the hurtful dinner. But her tone had shifted dramatically, from dismissive to almost fawning. The next day, my father called. "Princess," he began, using a childhood nickname he had abandoned when I was a teenager. "Got your invitation. Very impressive. This fiancé of yours must be doing well for himself." "We both are, Dad," I corrected gently. "I am still working at Morgan Stanley." Right. Well, just wanted to say we are looking forward to it. Been ages since your mother and I had a proper vacation. Very thoughtful of you to include us." He made no mention of their support for Allison's decision to exclude me from her wedding. No acknowledgement of the pain they had caused or the months of silence since I had walked out of their house in tears. The most dramatic reaction came from Allison herself, who called the following weekend, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "A yacht wedding in Monaco? Really, Mackenzie? Could you be any more obvious about trying to overshadow my wedding?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this call was exactly why I had chosen this particular wedding style. Not that I would admit that to her. Hello to you too, Allison. I am well, thanks for asking. How was your wedding? Do not play innocent, she snapped. You know exactly what you were doing. My wedding was 2 weeks ago, and now you are sending out invitations for this spectacle? Lucas and I are getting married in a way that reflects who we are, I said calmly. Just as you and Thomas did. Congratulations, by the way, since I was not there to say it in person. There was a pause before she continued, her voice slightly deflated. Mom and Dad cannot stop talking about it. Mom is already shopping for cruise wear, whatever that means. I am glad they are excited, I replied. We would love to have you and Thomas there too, if you want to come. Another pause. Of course we will come, she said finally. Everyone is going. I would look petty if I did not. I bit back a laugh at the irony of her statement. Great. Looking forward to seeing you there. Over the next few weeks, the calls kept coming. Aunt Meredith wanted to know what to pack for Monaco in June. Uncle Frank asked if there would be golf outings arranged. Cousins Grace and Tiffany both called to congratulate me and subtly inquire if I needed bridesmaids. Even distant relatives I barely spoke to reached out, suddenly remembering my existence. Each call followed the same pattern, effusive excitement about the wedding, no mention of their previous behavior, and thinly veiled curiosity about Lucas and his background. No one apologized. No one acknowledged the hurt they had caused. They simply pretended the past did not exist, erased by the allure of luxury and exclusivity. Lucas observed it all with a mixture of amusement and concern. Are you okay with this? He asked after I got off the phone with yet another suddenly attentive relative. They are treating you differently because of what I have, not because they have had a change of heart about how they treated you. I know, I said, leaning into his embrace. But in a way, it is validating. They are showing their true colors, again. All this time, they dismissed my success because it did not fit their definition of achievement. Now they are falling over themselves to be included because your success is something they understand and covet. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. Just remember that this wedding is still about us, you and me starting our life together. Do not let it become all about making a point to your family. He was right, of course. While the wedding location had been chosen partly out of petty revenge, the details we were so carefully selecting, the music that moved us, the foods we loved, the personal touches throughout the ceremony, those were genuinely about celebrating our love. As the months passed and our wedding drew closer, we completed a pre-wedding photo shoot on the Serene during a weekend trip to the Mediterranean. The photographer captured stunning images of us against the backdrop of clear blue water, the yacht's sleek white lines, and the picturesque coastline. With Karen's guidance, we accidentally allowed a few of these photos to appear on social media through the photographer's professional page. Within hours, my phone was buzzing constantly with notifications as family members called, texted, and commented on the images with increasing enthusiasm. Is that the actual yacht you are getting married on? Texted cousin Grace. OMG, you look like movie stars, gushed Aunt Meredith in a voicemail. Your mother showed me the photos, my father called to say. Very classy, princess. Very classy indeed. As the wedding approached, the family's excitement reached fever pitch. My mother called almost daily with questions about the dress code, the weather, what celebrities might be in Monaco at that time. Allison's calls became less hostile and more inquisitive, especially after Thomas apparently expressed enthusiasm about the unique experience. The final piece of the plan fell into place when my parents learned they would need to get to Monaco on their own before boarding the yacht for the cruise portion. The invitation covered first-class airfare, but they would need to navigate the logistics of getting from Nice Airport to Monaco. It seems complicated, my mother fretted during one call. We are not used to international travel like you are. I am sure you will figure it out, I replied, echoing the dismissive tone she had used with me for years. Or you could ask Allison to help you plan. She is so organized. The flash of panic in her voice was almost worth all the months of planning. Almost. As Lucas and I finalized the last details of our wedding, my dress fittings, his custom tuxedo, our vows, I found myself increasingly at peace with my decision to include my family. This wedding would be a celebration of finding love and acceptance with Lucas, but it would also be a reclaiming of my own worth in front of the people who had dismissed it for so long. They might be coming for the yacht and the luxury, but they would be witnessing something far more valuable, a woman who had found her voice, her partner, and her happiness despite their best efforts to diminish her. Allison's wedding took place on the first Saturday in June at the Presbyterian Church in our hometown, followed by a reception at the country club where our parents had been members for decades. I knew these details not because I was invited, but because my mother could not resist mentioning them repeatedly during our increasingly frequent phone calls as my own wedding approached. It was lovely, she reported the Monday after. Very traditional. The flowers were peonies and roses, all white, very classic. About 150 guests. Reverend Phillips performed the ceremony. You remember him, of course. I made appropriate noises of acknowledgement as she continued describing the event I had been explicitly banned from attending. Thomas's family came from Chicago. Such nice people, very proper. His father gave a wonderful toast. Allison wore your grandmother's pearl necklace, something borrowed, you know. She looked beautiful. She paused, perhaps realizing the insensitivity of providing a detailed account of a wedding I had been prohibited from attending. But instead of an apology, she quickly pivoted. Now, about your wedding. Will there be a place for guests to rest if they get seasick? Your Aunt Paula has always had a delicate stomach. Despite my exclusion, I found myself oddly unbothered as I scrolled through the wedding photos that family members posted online. The event looked exactly as my mother had described, nice, but conventional. White flowers, pastel bridesmaid dresses, a traditional tiered cake. Allison looked happy in her princess-style gown, Thomas handsome in his classic tuxedo. It was the wedding my parents had always envisioned for their daughters. What caught my attention, however, were the text messages I began receiving during the reception itself. Wish you were here, texted my cousin Heather. It is nice but pretty standard country club fare. When is your Monaco wedding again? Asked Uncle Frank's son Derek. Dad cannot stop talking about it. Even more surprising was a message from Thomas's sister, Emma, whom I had never met, heard about your yacht wedding from my parents. Sounds amazing. Sad we did not get to meet today. Looking forward to Monaco. As the evening progressed, the messages increased in frequency and enthusiasm. Family members who had never reached out to me directly before were suddenly curious about my life, my fiancé, and most of all, the details of our upcoming celebration. By the next morning, it was clear that while Allison had achieved her goal of being the center of attention at her wedding, the conversation had already shifted to anticipation of mine. The contrast between a traditional local wedding and an international yacht extravaganza was simply too great for people to ignore. In the weeks that followed, family interest in our wedding plans reached almost comical levels. My phone buzzed constantly with questions and comments. Do we need passports? Yes, Uncle Frank, for international travel. Will there be famous people there? Some of Lucas's clients were well known, but I deflected these questions. Should we exchange money before we arrive? Probably a good idea, Aunt Meredith. What kind of gifts do you register for when you already have a yacht? We had requested charitable donations in lieu of gifts, but I did not bother correcting this misconception. My mother began calling daily, each conversation more transparent than the last in her attempts to insert herself into the planning process. I was thinking, she said during one call, that I could help coordinate the family travel arrangements. Make sure everyone gets there on time. That is thoughtful, Mom, but our wedding planner has it under control. Well, what about the rehearsal dinner? I have some ideas for that. Your father and I would be happy to contribute, you know. Thanks, but Lucas's parents are handling that tradition, I replied, not mentioning that Elizabeth and Robert Bennet had already arranged for a private dinner at Monaco's most exclusive restaurant. The most surprising shift came from my cousins Grace and Tiffany, who had been particularly cruel at that family dinner months ago. Both called within days of each other with almost identical scripts. "Mackenzie. It has been too long," Grace gushed. "I was just thinking about how close we were as children." "We were not. I would love to be involved in your special day somehow. I know you probably have bridesmaids already, but if you need any help at all." Tiffany was even more direct. "So, who is in your bridal party?" "I was telling Mom how we always talked about being in each other's weddings when we were little. We had never had such conversations." I deflected graciously, explaining that we were keeping the wedding party small. Just Lucas's sister Sophia as my maid of honor and his brother Marcus as best man. Both cousins poorly concealed their disappointment. Even my Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister who had rarely shown much interest in my life, began calling regularly with helpful suggestions. "Monaco is very exclusive, dear. I have been there, you know, back in the 80s. You simply must visit the casino. Perhaps you could arrange a private tour for the family? And the palace, of course. Do you think Princess Charlene might attend? I read somewhere that she attends important events in the principality." I answered these inquiries with vague politeness while sharing the more absurd ones with Lucas, who found the whole situation both amusing and revealing. "They still have not apologized, have they?" he observed after I finished recounting my latest conversation with Aunt Patricia. "Not a single one," I confirmed. "It is like they have all collectively agreed to pretend nothing happened." My mother talks about Allison's wedding as if my absence was a simple scheduling conflict rather than a deliberate exclusion they all supported. Lucas shook his head. "At least now you know where you stand with them. This is not about reconciliation, it is about access to luxury and status." He was right, of course. The sudden interest in my life had nothing to do with genuine regret or a desire to repair relationships. It was entirely transactional. They wanted the experience I could now provide through my connection to Lucas. The most ironic aspect was that I had built a successful career and comfortable life on my own before meeting Lucas. I had achieved the financial independence and professional respect I had always worked toward. But my family had dismissed those accomplishments as unimportant or somehow less valuable than Allison's more traditional choices. It was only the visible trappings of wealth and exclusivity represented by the yacht and Monaco that finally caught their attention. As our wedding date approached, we completed a professional photo shoot aboard the Serene, capturing images of us against the stunning backdrop of the yacht and the Mediterranean coastline. With our wedding planner's subtle guidance, a few of these photos were accidentally shared on social media through the photographer's professional account, carefully tagged to ensure my family would see them. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone nearly exploded with notifications as family members called, texted, and commented with barely contained excitement. "Is that the actual yacht you are getting married on?" texted Grace. "It is enormous." "How many people does it hold?" asked Uncle Frank. "You look like movie stars," gushed Aunt Meredith in a voicemail. Even Allison, who had been maintaining a pretense of disinterest, could not resist commenting, "Looks expensive." "Thomas and I prefer experiences over materialism, but I guess different things work for different people." The thinly veiled jealousy in her message made me smile despite myself. After years of being compared unfavorably to my perfect sister, there was a certain satisfaction in watching her struggle to maintain her usual superiority in the face of something she clearly coveted. As the wedding drew closer, the practical realities of international travel began to dawn on my family. Many had rarely ventured beyond the East Coast, let alone to Europe. Their questions became increasingly practical and sometimes frantic. "What exactly should we pack for a yacht in Monaco?" my mother asked repeatedly. "Will there be medical facilities on board?" worried Uncle Frank, who had recently developed high blood pressure. "Do we need adapters for our electronics?" texted my father, who still struggled with smartphone basics. The most dramatic revelation came when my parents realized they would need to get themselves from Nice airport to Monaco before boarding the yacht for the cruise portion of the wedding celebration. "It seems very complicated," my mother fretted during one call. "We are not used to international travel like you are." "I am sure you will figure it out," I replied, echoing the dismissive tone she had used with me for years. "Or you could ask Allison to help you plan. She is so organized." The flash of panic in her voice was almost worth all the months of planning. Almost. What truly made it worthwhile was watching from a distance as my family, who had always been content in their small-town bubble, suddenly scrambled to prepare for an experience far outside their comfort zone, all because they could not bear to miss out on the event they had spent months dismissing before realizing its scale. In the week before our departure for Monaco, Lucas and I finalized the last details of our wedding, my final dress fitting, his custom tuxedo, our vows, and the intricate logistics of hosting 100 guests aboard a superyacht. Through it all, I found myself increasingly at peace with my decision to include my family. This wedding would be a celebration of finding love and acceptance with Lucas, but it would also be a reclaiming of my own worth in front of the people who had dismissed it for so long. They might be coming for the yacht and the luxury, but they would be witnessing something far more valuable, a woman who had found her voice, her partner, and her happiness despite their best efforts to diminish her. As Lucas and I packed for our flight to Nice, where we would spend a quiet week together before our guests arrived, he pulled me into his arms. "Ready for this?" he asked softly. "More than ready," I replied, realizing it was absolutely true. "It is going to be perfect." And it was, though not for the reasons my family expected. Monaco in June was everything we had hoped for: clear blue skies, warm Mediterranean breezes, and an atmosphere of timeless elegance. Lucas and I arrived a week before our guests, settling into a luxurious suite at the Hotel de Paris to finalize details and enjoy some quiet time together before the celebration began. On the day our family members were scheduled to arrive, we watched from the yacht as they trickled into Monaco, some looking confident, others clearly overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding them. The Serene was docked prominently in the harbor, impossible to miss with its imposing size and sleek design. We could see people pointing at it from the shore, unaware that it would be their home for the next week. My parents arrived looking simultaneously excited and out of place, my mother clutching her new designer handbag like a shield, my father tugging uncomfortably at the collar of his linen shirt. They had clearly shopped for yacht-appropriate clothing but missed the mark slightly, looking like they had stepped out of a country club brochure rather than understanding the relaxed luxury of Mediterranean style. Allison and Thomas arrived shortly after, her face fixed in a tight smile as she took in the surroundings. Thomas, on the other hand, appeared genuinely impressed and relaxed, pointing out features of the harbor to my sister, who nodded stiffly. As our guests were escorted to their hotels for the first night, Lucas and I remained on board the yacht, overseeing final preparations with our wedding planner, Karen. The welcome reception would be held that evening at Monaco's famous yacht club, where our guests would get their first taste of the celebration to come. "Are you nervous?" Lucas asked as we dressed for the evening. "Not about the wedding," I replied honestly. "Just about facing everyone after so long." He kissed my forehead gently. "Remember, you have nothing to prove to them. This celebration is about us and the people who truly support us. The rest are just spectators." The reception space was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, elegant floral arrangements in blues and whites, and a string quartet playing softly in the background. As guests arrived, their expressions ranged from wide-eyed amazement to studied casualness, as if trying to pretend this level of luxury was familiar to them. My parents made a beeline for us as soon as they entered, my mother embracing me with unusual warmth. "Mackenzie, darling. Everything is just magnificent," she gushed, her voice slightly too loud. "Your father and I are so proud." I accepted her embrace with a smile, noting that it was the first time she had expressed pride in me in years, and it was for something I had not actually done myself. "Thanks, Mom. I am glad you could make it." My father shook Lucas's hand with excessive vigor. "Quite a setup you have here, son. Very impressive business you have built." Lucas responded with his usual gracious charm. "Thank you, sir. I have been fortunate, but I am most fortunate in finding Mackenzie. She is the real prize." My father looked momentarily confused, as if the concept of valuing me over material success was foreign to him. "Yes, well, she has done well for herself too, I suppose." As the evening progressed, I observed the fascinating social dynamics unfolding around us. My extended family members, who had laughed at my exclusion from Allison's wedding, were now doing everything possible to ingratiate themselves with Lucas and his equally wealthy friends. Aunt Meredith cornered Lucas's business partner, hanging on his every word. Uncle Frank boasted loudly about non-existent yachting experience to anyone who would listen. Cousins Grace and Tiffany had positioned themselves near the entrance, seemingly determined to be photographed by the event photographer as many times as possible. They had clearly spent considerable money on their outfits and were visibly calculating the relative wealth and status of each guest as they arrived. The most telling interactions, however, were with Lucas's family. His parents, Robert and Elizabeth Bennett, were warm, unpretentious people despite their considerable fortune. They moved through the crowd with genuine interest in meeting everyone, asking thoughtful questions and listening attentively to the answers. When Elizabeth engaged my mother in conversation, I overheard snippets that made me wince. "Mackenzie is such a remarkable young woman," Elizabeth was saying. "Lucas tells us she has built quite an impressive career in finance." "Yes," my mother replied, suddenly eager to claim credit. "We always encouraged her ambitions. I always told her she could do anything she set her mind to." I caught Lucas's eye across the room, and he raised an eyebrow slightly, having heard enough of my stories to know the truth. I just shook my head with a small smile. Tonight was not the night for confrontations. The most uncomfortable moment came when Allison finally approached us, Thomas at her side. "Congratulations," she said, the words stiff and formal. "This is all very impressive." "Thank you," I replied simply. "Thomas, it is good to see you again. I hope you both had a beautiful wedding day." Thomas smiled genuinely. "We did, thank you. Though I wish you could have been there." An awkward silence fell as Allison shot him a look. "Well," Lucas interjected smoothly, "we are glad you both could join us for our celebration." "Would not miss it," Thomas said warmly, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the tension. "I have never been on a yacht this size. The tour tomorrow should be fascinating." As they moved away, I saw Allison whispering furiously to Thomas, who shrugged in response, his expression suggesting he did not share her concerns about appearing too enthusiastic. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of carefully planned activities: a guided tour of Monaco, a day trip to nearby French villages, exclusive shopping experiences, and elegant meals. Throughout it all, I watched my family members oscillate between trying to appear sophisticated enough to belong in these surroundings and being unable to contain their excitement at experiences they had never imagined having. My father repeatedly mentioned Lucas's success to anyone who would listen, as if trying to establish himself as an important figure by association. My mother collected business cards from Lucas's well-connected friends, dropping hints about Allison's teaching career and whether they knew of any opportunities that might be more prestigious. Most telling was how they spoke about me to others. Suddenly, the career they had dismissed for years was being described as "our Mackenzie's impressive finance work and the amazing success she has achieved." My mother even claimed to have always known she was destined for great things, a sentiment I had never once heard from her lips before. The night before our wedding ceremony, we hosted a rehearsal dinner aboard the yacht, giving our guests their first opportunity to experience the vessel that would be their home for the next few days. The Serene was truly magnificent, 300 feet of floating luxury with multiple decks, a swimming pool, formal dining room, cinema, and helicopter landing pad. As our guests boarded, their expressions were priceless. Aunt Meredith actually gasped aloud, while Uncle Frank went suddenly silent, his usual bluster deserting him in the face of opulence beyond his imagination. My cousins could barely contain themselves, taking selfies at every opportunity, clearly intending to milk this experience for social media content for months to come. My parents tried for nonchalance but failed utterly, my mother's eyes widening as a staff member offered her champagne on a silver tray, my father running his hand reverently along the yacht's polished wood railings. Allison's reaction was the most complex, a mixture of awe, envy, and a desperate attempt to appear unimpressed. "It is a bit much, is not it?" I overheard her saying to Thomas. "So ostentatious." "It is magnificent," he replied simply, not playing along with her attempt to diminish the experience. "And it makes perfect sense for them, given Lucas's business. I think it is wonderful." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. As the yacht sailed slowly along the Mediterranean coastline, I prepared in the master suite with Sophia, Lucas's sister, who had become a dear friend over the past year. My dress was simple but elegant, a silk column with delicate beading that caught the light as I moved. "How are you feeling?" Sophia asked as the makeup artist put the finishing touches on my look. "Surprisingly calm," I replied, realizing it was true. "I thought I would be more nervous, especially with all the family dynamics." "That is because this is right," she said, squeezing my hand. "Lucas adores you, and you belong together. The rest is just scenery." The ceremony was set for sunset on the top deck, with Monaco's stunning coastline as our backdrop. As I waited to make my entrance, I caught glimpses of our guests taking their seats, Lucas's family and friends on one side, mine on the other. The contrast was striking, his relatives relaxed and joyful, mine still somewhat stiff and self-conscious despite their designer outfits and practiced smiles. As the music began and I walked toward Lucas, who stood waiting with an expression of pure love on his face, everything else fell away. The petty family drama, the years of dismissal and hurt, the complicated emotions that had partly inspired this elaborate celebration, none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered was the man before me and the life we were choosing to build together. Our vows were personal and heartfelt. Lucas spoke of finding his perfect partner, someone who challenged and inspired him, whose strength and intelligence he admired beyond measure. When he referenced how I had faced rejection with dignity and kept my heart open despite being hurt, I saw my parents shift uncomfortably in their seats. My own vows spoke of finding acceptance and true partnership, of building a life based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. "You saw me, truly saw me, when others looked past me," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion behind the words. "With you, I never have to dim my light or make myself smaller. You celebrate my success as I celebrate yours." As we exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, the setting sun bathed everything in golden light, and for a perfect moment, all was right with the world. The reception that followed was everything we had planned for. Exquisite food, flowing champagne, a live band that had everyone dancing, and later, fireworks lighting up the night sky over the water. It was, by any standard, spectacular. Throughout the evening, various family members approached us, their attitudes transformed by the experiences of the past few days. My father, slightly drunk on expensive scotch, pulled me aside at one point. "You did good, princess," he slurred, his arm heavy around my shoulders. "Really good. Always knew you were smart, but this." He gestured vaguely at our surroundings, "This is something else." "My marriage to Lucas is something else," I corrected gently. "He is an exceptional man, Dad. I hope you have taken the time to get to know him beyond his success." He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "Course I have. He is a good man. Treats you right. That is what matters." It was the closest thing to genuine approval I had heard from him in years, even if it was alcohol-assisted. My mother cornered me near the dessert table, her face flushed with excitement. "Darling, this has been just magical. Elizabeth has invited us to their home in California. Can you imagine?" And she mentioned something about holiday gatherings rotating between families. "We would love to host everyone next Christmas, of course." The sudden shift from years of minimal interest in my life to eager planning of future family gatherings was almost dizzying. "That sounds nice, Mom. We will have to see what our plans are." Of course, she rushed to agree. You are both so busy and successful. But family is important, is not it? We should all make more effort to stay connected. The irony of this statement, coming from a woman who had supported banning me from my own sister's wedding, was apparently lost on her. The most dramatic moment came when Allison approached me as I stood alone for a moment, watching Lucas dance with his mother. Congratulations, she said, her voice thick with emotion that seemed to be a complicated mixture of genuine feeling and resentment. It was a beautiful ceremony. Thank you, I replied. How are you enjoying the yacht experience? It is. She struggled visibly. It is incredible. I have never seen anything like it. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before she blurted out, was this all to show me up? To make my wedding look small and provincial by comparison? I considered my answer carefully. No, Allison. This wedding reflects Lucas and me, our connection to the sea, our love of travel, the life we are building together. It was never about competing with you. But the timing, so close to my wedding, was partly petty, yes, I admitted. I was hurt when you excluded me from your wedding and when our family thought that was perfectly acceptable. But this celebration evolved into something much more meaningful than just a response to that hurt. She looked away, blinking rapidly. I should not have banned you from my wedding. It was small of me. It was not quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I had ever heard from her. Thomas thinks I was wrong, she continued. He has been saying it since the beginning. He really likes you, you know. I like him too, I said sincerely. He seems like a good man. He is, she agreed, a genuine smile briefly lighting her face. I got lucky there, at least. Before the conversation could continue, we were interrupted by Cousin Grace, eager to tell me about a business idea she suddenly wanted my opinion on. As Allison drifted away, I caught a glimpse of her expression, thoughtful and perhaps a little sad. As the night progressed and the celebration continued around us, Lucas found me for a quiet moment by the railing, looking out at the twinkling lights of Monaco in the distance. Happy? He asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Completely, I answered truthfully, leaning back against him. Though not for the reasons I expected when we planned all this. Oh? I thought I wanted to see them all impressed and maybe a little envious, I explained. And part of me did enjoy that. But what I really needed was to stand in front of the people who dismissed me for so long and declare my own worth, not through words, but through the life I have built and the love I have found. That feels better than any revenge could. Lucas kissed my temple softly. You are remarkable, Mackenzie Bennett. And they are finally beginning to see it. As we rejoined our guests for the final dance of the evening, I looked around at the gathering, Lucas's genuinely supportive family mingling with my suddenly attentive relatives, all against the backdrop of luxury and privilege that had finally made my family take notice of me. It was not the reconciliation I had once dreamed of as a child, but it was a new beginning on my own terms. And for now, that was enough. After the whirlwind of our wedding celebration, Lucas and I embarked on our honeymoon, a 3-week journey through the Mediterranean on a smaller, more intimate yacht. Away from family drama and the carefully orchestrated spectacle of our wedding, we found a peaceful rhythm together, exploring picturesque coastal towns, swimming in crystal clear waters, and simply enjoying the beginning of our married life. Do you miss the big boat? Lucas teased as we lounged on the deck of our honeymoon yacht, still luxurious at 120 feet, but considerably more modest than the Serene. Not at all, I laughed. This feels more like us, special but not overwhelming. Though I have to admit, seeing everyone's faces when they boarded the Serene was pretty satisfying. Particularly your cousin Grace, Lucas noted with a grin. I thought her eyes might actually pop out of her head. We spent those weeks deliberately disconnected from the outside world, checking our phones only occasionally and focusing on being present with each other. It was the perfect reset after months of wedding planning and years of complicated family dynamics. When we finally returned to New York and resumed our normal lives, reality came flooding back in the form of dozens of messages from family members. My mother had called daily since the wedding, leaving increasingly elaborate voicemails about keeping in touch and planning the next family gathering. My father had texted several times asking for restaurant recommendations for his colleagues and wondering if Lucas might be interested in golfing next time they visited the city. Most surprisingly, Allison had sent a handwritten letter that arrived during our absence. Unlike the others, her message was not filled with effusive compliments about the wedding or thinly veiled attempts to maintain access to our lifestyle. Instead, it was a genuine, if difficult, attempt at apology. "I have been thinking a lot about my behavior," she wrote. "Excluding you from my wedding was petty and hurtful. I told myself it was about having my moment in the spotlight, but the truth is I have always been jealous of you, Mackenzie. You built a life on your own terms while I followed the path our parents laid out. Seeing you with Lucas and how happy you are made me realize that my jealousy has cost me a relationship with my sister. I do not expect immediate forgiveness, but I hope we might start to rebuild what I damaged." Lucas found me sitting on our balcony, rereading the letter with tears in my eyes. "Bad news?" he asked gently, sitting beside me. "Actually, no," I replied, handing him the letter. "Maybe the first step towards something better." As he read it, his expression grew thoughtful. "Do you think she means it?" "I am not sure," I admitted. "But it is the first time Allison has ever acknowledged her part in our difficult relationship. That counts for something." Over the following weeks, I found myself facing a decision about how to move forward with my family. The dramatic shift in their attitude toward me was transparently motivated by Lucas's wealth and status, yet beneath that superficial change, I wondered if there might be an opportunity for genuine connection. Lucas, as always, provided a balanced perspective. "You do not have to decide everything at once," he reminded me. "You can establish new boundaries while still leaving room for people to show whether they are capable of real change." Taking his advice, I began responding selectively to family outreach. My mother's daily calls went mostly to voicemail, but I would call her back once a week for a brief, pleasant conversation. When she pushed for more frequent contact or tried to plan elaborate family gatherings, I gently but firmly maintained my boundaries. "We are quite busy with work and settling into married life, Mom," I would say. "But Sunday brunches once a month might be nice to start with." My father's financial inquiries and not-so-subtle hints about Lucas's business connections were met with polite deflection. "Lucas's work keeps him very busy, Dad, but I would be happy to recommend a financial advisor if you are looking for investment advice." With Allison, I took a more open approach, responding to her letter with a suggestion that we meet for coffee when I next visited Connecticut. Our first meeting was awkward but surprisingly honest. Without the rest of the family present, we were able to speak more freely about the dynamics that had shaped our relationship. "I always thought you were Mom and Dad's favorite," I admitted, stirring my latte. "They praised everything you did and seemed to dismiss my accomplishments." Allison looked genuinely surprised. "I always thought they were harder on me because they expected more. Nothing was ever good enough. When you moved to New York and started your career, I was jealous of your freedom. You seemed to escape their expectations while I was still trying to fulfill them." "I guess we were both seeing different sides of the same dysfunctional system," I observed. She nodded slowly. "Thomas has been saying something similar. He thinks our parents pitted us against each other, maybe without even realizing it. It was not an instant reconciliation, but it was a start, a fragile bridge being built between the women we had become rather than the rivals we had been raised to be." As months passed, Lucas and I settled into our married life. We balanced demanding careers with time together, traveled when we could, and began discussing starting a family of our own someday. Through it all, we continued to navigate the evolving relationship with my family. The most noticeable change was in the power dynamic. Where once I had been the outsider seeking approval, now family members sought my attention and inclusion. Invitations arrived for every conceivable event: cousins' graduations, aunts' anniversary parties, neighborhood barbecues that would never have warranted a call in the past. "You realize what has happened, do not you?" Lucas observed after I mentioned another invitation from relatives I barely knew. You have become the family celebrity. That is ridiculous, I protested, though I knew he was right. It is human nature, he shrugged. People are attracted to success and status. The question is how you want to use that position. His observation gave me pause. The yacht wedding had begun partly as revenge, a way to show my family what they had dismissed for so long. But now that I had their attention, what did I want to do with it? The answer came gradually as I observed the patterns in our family interactions. Despite their newfound interest in my life, old habits persisted. My mother still occasionally made dismissive comments about my career choices. My father still showed more interest in Lucas's business than in my professional accomplishments. Extended family members still sometimes treated me as an access point to luxury rather than a person worthy of genuine connection. A year after our wedding, we hosted a family gathering at our New York apartment to announce that we were expecting our first child. The reaction was predictably enthusiastic, with my mother immediately launching into plans for an extravagant baby shower and nursery design. "We will need to plan a truly special celebration," she gushed. "Perhaps at that lovely yacht club where you had your wedding welcome dinner? And of course, only the finest nursery designers." I read about one who has done work for several celebrities. I exchanged a glance with Lucas before responding. "Actually, Mom, we are planning something simple. A small gathering with close friends and family. And we are designing the nursery ourselves." Her face fell slightly. "But darling, this is your first child. It should be spectacular." "Our child will be spectacular because they will be loved," I said firmly. "Not because of designer furniture or elaborate parties." Later, after everyone had left, Lucas found me standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. "You handled that perfectly," he said, wrapping his arms around me, hands resting gently on my still flat stomach. "I just keep thinking about what kind of family I want our child to have," I replied. "I do not want them growing up feeling like their worth is measured by external achievements or material success." "They will not," Lucas assured me. "Because we will make sure they know they are valued for exactly who they are." In that moment, I realized that the true victory was not in the yacht wedding that had made my family call daily, not in the reversal of power dynamics, and not even in the grudging respect I had finally earned from people who had dismissed me for years. The true victory was in breaking the cycle. My child would grow up in a home where their inherent worth was never questioned. They would be celebrated for their efforts, not just their achievements. They would know that love was not conditional on success or status. And they would learn that forgiveness was possible, but it required genuine change, not just words. As for my relationship with my family, it continued to evolve. Some connections strengthened. Allison and I developed a cautious but growing sisterhood based on our shared experiences as new mothers when she announced her own pregnancy 6 months after my news. Some relationships remained superficial. Certain cousins and aunts who could never quite see past the lifestyle to the person. And some found a new, healthier balance, my parents slowly learning to respect boundaries and acknowledge my life choices without constant judgment. The path to genuine family reconciliation was longer and more complex than the quick fix a spectacular wedding could provide. It required consistent boundaries, honest communication, and a willingness to forgive without forgetting the lessons learned. On my daughter Lily's first birthday, as I watched my family gathered in our home, Lucas's parents chatting warmly with mine, Allison's son playing with toys alongside my daughter, extended family members who had made efforts to build authentic connections, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The yacht wedding that had begun as revenge had ultimately been a catalyst for transformation. Not because it impressed my family with wealth and status, but because it forced all of us to confront the shallow values and dysfunctional patterns that had defined our relationships for too long. True respect, I had learned, could not be demanded or purchased with spectacular displays. It had to be earned through consistent actions, maintained through clear boundaries, and valued only when given freely, not extracted through manipulation or material enticement. As Lily toddled over to me, arms outstretched and face alight with uncomplicated joy, I lifted her up and held her close, making a silent promise. She would inherit many things from her parents, Perhaps Lucas's warm brown eyes or my curly hair, his easy confidence or my determination. But the legacy of conditional love and constant comparison that had shadowed my childhood would end with me. That was the true revenge, not the yacht wedding that made my family call daily, but the liberation from needing their approval at all. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who didn't value you properly? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey with me, please like and subscribe for more stories about finding your worth and building the life you deserve. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting free. Thank you for being here with me today.